So Tom, if there were one thing you would change to improve patient safety, what would it be?
For me, that would be clinical alarm management. The challenge is the nurses that have to respond to those alarms become fatigued after time. They become desensitized to all those alarms. And if they miss one important alarm, the consequences could be catastrophic for a patient.
Right, but how do you sort through all the false alarms and the nuisance alarms to determine the one significant event?
That's a great question. So number one is looking at the parameters that you use for those devices very carefully. So for example, pulse oximetry, someone may set the parameter for the alarm to go off at, say, 92%, where they really wouldn't act on that alarm unless it was a 90% saturation. So looking at the practice of setting that alarm to 90%, for example, could decrease that number of alarms by maybe even dozens of alarms per day.
And that's something that would have to be taken care of at the policy level within an organization, correct?
That's correct. There's a process you need to go through with the physicians and leadership to determine for that unit and for that type of patient, what should that setting be to make sure you have the optimal setting.
How are organizations dealing with the problem of alarm fatigue?
The challenge with alarms is it's not just one element. It's really a systems problem. So you need to approach it as a systems problem where you look at the practices, which the parameters is a good example of that. Also, an example of practice is the escalation policy they have. So if nurse one doesn't hear the alarm, is there another nurse that can be the backup to that alarm? Second is infrastructure, making sure you consider the layout of the department so that you can have eyesight, and if not, that the alarm structure is designed to accommodate the physical layout of that space. Culture is also very important to make sure that you understand the level of accountability and other elements that can affect the performance within that system. And lastly is technology. Technology can assist with what we call integration technologies, where you actually send those alarms to middleware that can then triage those alarms, prioritize them, and in some cases send them to, say, a SpectraLink or a phone that the nurse is wearing. And that's one solution that can fit depending upon the system.
While you're talking about technological solutions, how would you recommend, briefly, an organization go about implementing something like a middleware solution?
So when you look at the technology, you need to look at the system it's going to be supporting in. You have the alarm itself, alarming device, that sends its signal to middleware, a middleware system that triages kind of the intelligence of that alarm management process. And then they send them to a communication device. The whole technology line of those three elements has to be thought through, set carefully, and most importantly, tested. We've dealt with cases, for example, where the number of alarms from the middleware being sent to the communication device didn't understand the device could only handle 20 alarms. And the 21st alarm was the important alarm.
What would you recommend then that healthcare organizations start with today or tomorrow? What can they handle immediately to start looking at their approach to alarm management safety?
Number one, it's an issue that most hospitals are beginning or have taken action on. In fact, in 2014, the Joint Commission had a national patient safety goal for alarm management. And that required in 2014 for them to really inventory and understand what alarms they had. In 2016, this year, they are now expected to have taken action on these alarms and have a strategy in place. And really the way to approach that is to look at it as a system, to look at those four elements of culture, infrastructure, practice, and technology, to look at each unit and the unique clinical requirements of those patients to see if that system is effective, and then use that methodology and do the same assessment through other critical departments.
Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.